let's talk about the number one trap you may fall into when it comes to running your business based on your personality type.
You are not just another hustling salesperson. You are the expert, the resource, the valuable partner for your clients. And how you grow your business should reflect how your clients see you. Welcome to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. We generate referrals without asking, build positive client experiences, and help you take control of your business. Here's your charmingly sarcastic host, Stacey Brown Randall.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 199 of the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Brown Randall. Woohoo, 199. So very exciting. Yeah, it's so exciting. I cannot wait to hit 200 next week. But we have a pretty important episode today before we can jump ahead to next week. So let's dive right in. So we're in the middle of a two-part series. Last week, Naomi was with us and she was walking us through the 5 personality type categories that she uses as a brand guru to help people not only brand their business in a way that's going to work for them to market and use the marketing channels, but also to understand how best to run their business. So she takes the 4-letter codes of the Myers-Briggs and then groups folks into 5 personality type categories of business owners. And then she helps them understand how best to not only run and manage and grow their business, but also marketing from that perspective as well. So we have a pretty good conversation there. So she's going to dive into the number one trap that we fall into when we're growing our business based on our personality types. So if you listened to last week's episode, then you probably have a good understanding of how this works and how her system and her methodology works. The CAR, you'll probably remember her talking about the CAR. And so that model, and then exactly what it means in terms of how best to run your business. And then this week, we're diving into the trap you may fall into when it comes to running your business. So I'm excited to bring her back. Remember, if you want to take the Myers-Briggs assessment, you can go to her website at brandwhisperers.com.au, because of course she is in Australia, which you'll pick up on pretty quickly because of her fabulous accent. So brandwhisperers.com.au. And of course, make sure you take that assessment so you can understand what is your letter code if you don't remember it the last time you took it, so that you can really listen for when she starts talking about your personality. All right, let's dive in. Naomi, I'm so excited to have you back for round 2, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to come back for round 2. Thank you for diving in with us on, I think, which is going to be a great follow-up episode to the episode we did last week, which is episode 198. I'm excited for our follow-up this week. So before we dive in, let's do a quick, we're not going to recap the entire episode from last week. If people are interested, they need to go listen to it. But I do think as we get ready to dive into these number one traps that people fall into based on their personality types, we do need to hit a high level of what are those 5 personality type categories that you were teaching us about last week and what we need to know about them so we can dive into the next piece.
Absolutely, Stacey. Thanks for having me back again. Yeah, so as we covered last week, working with businesses and personality types, I've come up with 5 categories to put them in. So first of all, we've got the corporates. Now, these are the people that you would traditionally see a lot of in the business world. They run businesses really efficiently and effectively. So when you're coming into the business world and you're trying to learn about how to run a business, these are the types that you'll most often see or predominantly see because they're very visible and there's lots of them. The second category is the individualists. These people they're sort of the opposite types of the corporates in that they want to run their business their way. They have really strong ideals about the way that their businesses should run. Then there's the traditionalists. I often see these people in family-owned businesses. Family and tradition is really important to them, community and networks. So their businesses often center around those areas. Then we've got the change makers. They're the people that are quite visionary and are really out to make a really big change in the world for either culture or individuals. And finally, we have the life seekers. These are the people that They usually move pretty fast. They want to just squeeze every experience out of life, and they're really vibrant and alive, and they sort of want their businesses to be that way as well.
And so for those of you who may have okay, I got that overview. Now I've got to go back and listen to last week's episode to really kind of dive in. What I want you to keep in mind about what Naomi is talking about, because yes, you should go back and listen to last week's episode, because she talks about all these different ways of where do the 16 personalities come from? And they fall into these 5 kind of categories that we're now talking about, that she uses though as a brand agency. And she uses them kind of using your personality to kind of help you figure out how likely you are best to run your business, but then to form your marketing around it, like the marketing channels you're using. So we had a very interesting conversation. Now I can't remember if this is when we were recording last time or not. But we had an interesting conversation about I'm like, oh my gosh, tell me I have to learn TikTok dances or Clubhouse. And I'm like, not another marketing channel. I don't know how that speaks necessarily to my personality type, but it's really interesting how I love that you have this overarching framework of how business owners, by their personality, should consider who they are in terms of then how they decide to build and grow and run their businesses. And then you come alongside and help them do that from a branding perspective as well, particularly as it comes down to marketing channels. But what I also love is because you spend so much time with all these people, all these different types of people, hanging out with all the peoples, right? That you also recognized, and that's what we're going to focus on for today's episode, is that you also recognize that each personality type has this one trap that each of them can kind of fall into when they're growing their business. That obviously is usually, I'm going to assume, runs counter to how they should be doing it, without recognizing that what you're doing is why you're miserable. So you should stop.
Absolutely.
Right? You should stop doing that and stop being miserable and run your business a different way, and you'll love it. So what Naomi's going to do now, she's going to kind of go through these 5 types again, based on the number one trap that each of these personality types falls into when growing their business. And we're going to have a nice little discussion around it and try to keep that discussion off of me and my personality type, but my business type. Okay, so let's start with the corporates.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll start. That's a really good place to start, because as I said, there's a lot of these corporate types in business. Out of the proportion of personality types in business, you do see these a lot. So these corporate types, if you're familiar with the 4-letter codes, the four-letter Myers-Briggs codes, these are the ENTJs and the ESTJs. That 4-letter code actually unlocks the cognitive functions that you prefer to use. We spoke a little bit about this last week. So I use a framework called the CAR model. And each personality type has 4 different cognitive functions in different seats of a car. Like if you imagine your brain as a 4-person car with a driver, co-pilot, a 10-year-old in the back and a 3-year-old in the back. Depending on the cognitive functions you use, you'll find different things easier, different things harder. You'll have a flow state in some things, and some things that you will be your blind spots. So what the corporates, the ENTJs and the ESTJs have in common is the cognitive function that is their driver function or their flow state is what we call effectiveness. And this is all about resource management. So these people are just adept at managing time, money, energy, and they're brilliant achievers. They know how to get things done. They can set a to-do list and have it done by lunchtime, while the rest of us are still sort of scratching our heads going, what was I going to do today? They're phenomenally hardworking. They know how to delegate. They're natural leaders. So it's not unsurprising that they navigate towards the business world. But the thing is when the rest of us, different personality types, come into the business world and see that this is the way that is the successful way of running business, and we try and mimic that or copy that, it doesn't quite work out that way. And so we just go, oh, well, we're bad at business then, we shouldn't do it. But that's not necessarily the case. But so sticking back to the one thing that will trip them up, or the traps that they get into, for the corporates, the ENTJs and the ESTJs, often it can either be sort of micromanaging teams and not letting their teams have the autonomy to get things done, or it can when you see big companies that have forgotten the people, they're all about systems. And, it's like, people become numbers. That is the downside of the ENTJ, ESTJ businesses. So for those two businesses, the idea is to keep that culture happening, keep remembering the people like in your teams and as customers. So having like cultural ambassadors, seeing how you can personalize your services so people don't feel so much like numbers. So you're really connecting to the humans in your team and your community. And we're seeing this now in big corporates. You know how like big corporates now are actually employing smaller influencers, because the smaller influencers around the world have a real connection to their audiences that these bigger corporates can't replicate. So they're asking these other smaller influencers to help them keep in touch with the humanity of their audiences.
And I think it's so interesting of how many times somebody decides that they're going to start a business and then they start mimicking the other businesses that they see that are typically at a totally different stage than they are.
A different stage, a different industry, a different personality type. And if actually you've raised a really good point there, if there was one thing one trap that any of these types could get into, that would be the one trap, is going in. And when you're learning something new, it's totally natural to want to look at what other people are doing and sort of getting an advantage or leverage from that. But it's always about bringing it back to your own self-awareness. So this framework that I use helps you understand that, like, is this going to work for me, or is it just going to make me fall flat on my face and make me want to exit the business world straight away?
Yeah, because running a business is hard enough than actually realizing that maybe you've set it up and are running it completely wrong.
Yes.
we need to go into this with what we can do. And I would say the longer somebody is in business, though, would you say that, I don't know, and maybe this is just with your experience with the clients that you work with, but that eventually, if they don't know this about themselves, right? They don't know which, Myers-Briggs 4-letter code they have, or which of these 5 personality types they kind of fall into. If they never really know that, but they eventually become successful and they love their business. So those two dynamics, like they're successful and they're loving their business, that more than likely they've adapted to how they should be running their business at some point. Like, I think about the difference between how I started and ran my first business, which says a lot about it because it failed after 4 years.
Yep.
Probably tells you everything you need to know. But, the idea there is that how different I ran that business to how differently I run this business, and even how differently I run this business than how I ran it 10 years ago when I was starting it, when I was 10 years younger. Like, I think some of this is like the personality piece and the figuring out what's going to make me happy and what's going to make me want to do this every day. And like, where do I live? I call it my zone of genius. Like, where do I live in that space, right? As much as possible, because that's where I'm happiest, while knowing I have other things I've got to do, but I can have support teams around me as well. And I think some of that comes with age, right? Some of that confidence comes with age. Some of that confidence comes with experience. But I think the other piece is that ability, as we get older, we also get to know ourselves a little bit better. We're like not as scared of all the other parts of ourselves. So I think it helps us, right? I think it helps us to be like, I don't have to run this business like a corporate. I can go run it like the life seeker that I ultimately am.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's one of the reasons that I run my business. It's the thing that I'm passionate about, because there's so many, like if we're talking about like the longer you run your business, the more that you understand these things. And I think that that's often through trial and error. We experience what we like and what we don't like, and we change course. But then the failure rate for small businesses is so high, because sometimes either people give up, they go, well, I tried it and it didn't work for me, or they didn't have the funds to keep going for long enough to figure that out. And that's what I'm hoping that that my business can help people do, is like shorten that and get to that point a little bit quicker so they can thrive as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so then let's move on to the next group and talk about the number one trap they have.
Yes, so the individualists. So these business owners, so if we start with two of them, firstly, the INFP, who I call the torchbearer, they fight for a cause. So they're generally quite unassuming. They accept everybody for who they are. But to really get up and to make a business work, they sort of need to have a fire in their belly, so to speak, to make it happen. And they often have a big dream, but they can lack the concrete steps to make that happen. So with an INFP, that effectiveness function that we said that there was the driver for the corporates, it's their 3-year-old. So in that car model, it's the 3-year-old or the little backseat function that isn't as sophisticated as their other functions. So if they try and run their business, even though they've got this big dream, if they try and run it like one of the corporates, they will burn out really quickly. So for the INFP then, what they need to remember is to have support around building their business and really decide if they want to run a big business or if they're really happy just being a sole trader. And if they do want to have a big business, is having people or support to help them manage those logistics or have a really simple business system. So they offer one product, they offer it really well at a really high rate, become an expert in their field, and then the systems around running their business are a lot simpler.
Oh, simple. It's like my favorite word. It's not the word we always think about when we think about running a business, but oh my gosh, if you could just look at some things inside your business and then figure out how to make them simpler, guarantee you'll be happier. Like it's almost impossible for you not to be happy. Just take 1 or 2 processes, 1 or 2 problem children clients, and just, make it simpler. Okay. So what's the other group that fits into them? So you said INFP. What's the other one?
INFP, and then there's ISFPs who also have effectiveness as their 3-year-old. So these people are very experiential. You often see them as like actors, musicians, chefs. They sometimes love nature. They love being in the moment and creating an experience for people. And sometimes they find it really hard to communicate things in words. So they create these experiences and offer them as services or products for people, for them to really understand the complexities of human emotions, I guess. And so what I see in this type is that they change a lot. It's almost like, when you have a chef and they have a menu and they're like, okay, we've run that menu, it's time to get on to the next one. Or a musician that goes, okay, I'm working on this album, then it's out and gone. When it comes to businesses and running service and products, that can be difficult. So often I see ISFPs set up a business and then they put all this time and effort into setting up the systems and the offering, and then they go, oh no, that's not the right thing to do anymore. I want to do something different. So before they've made money with it, it's gone and they're on to the next thing. So what I suggest that for them to do is have a really simple brand and a really simple system that they create that they can sort of exchange every time they want to change. So say it's someone that runs an event, they've got a system to run their event, and then they can take it to different locations or change out the speakers or, so they're setting up a system, but it's like a really flexible, interchangeable system so it can run with them as they change. They change what they want to look at.
Or let's just say it, as they get bored.
As they get bored, yes.
And they want something else. I mean, hey, that's the spice of life. I totally get it. We need those folks in the world. Except when my chef starts removing my favorite items from the menu. Because
you hate that.
Yes. And they're like, oh, we've got a fresh spring menu. And I'm like, I want the winter one back. I would like whatever that beet salad, please. Like whatever it was, right? Like,
and they're like, no, that's dead now. That doesn't know. I'm not feeling aligned to that anymore. So I can't bring it back, even though everybody wants it. And that is sort of where the individualists can get a bit stubborn. They're like, I don't care if it's what everybody wants. I'm just like, I'm not feeling it. And so it's not happening.
Oh my God. I think about one of my favorite restaurants to go to in Charlotte. There is one appetizer that they don't offer anymore and one salad that my husband loves. And we just ask for it. And they're like, yeah, we've got the ingredients. We can make it. We're like, thank you. Appreciate you.
Handy when they'll do that for you. That's a beautiful local business.
It is totally, yes. Okay, so let's move on. Who's next? Traditionalist?
Okay, so next we have the INTP and the ISTP. So INTPs are we call them the truth seekers. And often their businesses, they've come into business, they want something to be technically superior. So they'll often see products or services out there that aren't accurate or aren't correct. And they're like, I want to fix this. I want to, these people are being misled. I want to make the best product possible, and they go out and they actually do it. And if you speak to an INTP, they will have a depth of knowledge and facts about whatever their product or service is. But often they can shy away from like the people side of business. what I've seen is letting their brand carry that weight of the people side of things, and having, I think we spoke about this last week, is having systems and processes set up to automate that side of the business. So, they could run some ads, have them coming through to an email system and getting it set up that way. So they're not the people person around their business. They just communicate this really technically amazing product.
Okay. And that was INTP. And what was the other one?
INTP. So the thing I see about them is them feeling like they have to be the face of their business, because that's what the business sort of thing says. It's like, you've got to tell your story. You've got to be the face. And they're like, oh, I don't want to be the face. It's like, let your technical genius be the face.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And so what were the two that were in that group?
So then there's the ISTP. So they're very similar. They both lead with a cognitive function called accuracy, which is all about being accurate. INTPs are more in their heads accurate, whereas ISTPs are about accuracy in the sensory world. So they can often be amazing athletes, mechanics. They can be like Bear Grylls. I don't 100% know if he's an ISTP, but I would guess like in the real world, experiencing things in the moment, and they're really technically proficient. Also like James Bond, like, cool, calm, collected, but could, turn around and shoot like 50 people accurately at once. And you're like, how do they even do that?
Right. With bullets whizzing by their head.
Yes. And then they're just still completely calm. So, but what I see ISTPs doing in business is really ignoring that people side of their business again. And it's not, you don't see James Bond going around hugging the people after they've been shot. He's saving them, and then other people deal with the looking after the people afterwards. So that's what the ISTPs, and so ISTPs can often be like, if they're not running businesses, they can often be involved in like emergency services, that sort of thing. It's like they're really proficient at keeping people alive, the mechanical systems, whether it's like cars and trucks or the human body. So when it comes to their business, it's letting their technical excellence rather than their social skills promote their business, because that's where they're naturally good at. And they're usually really, really, really technically proficient in the things that they choose to do. So I know like of a business, like they make knives, like really beautiful, like they're the best knives that you'd ever make. But this person is an introvert. They don't want to step out into the real world. They don't want themselves to be known. They're quite private. But when they talk about the technical proficiency of their products, people can't help but listen.
That's awesome. Okay. Who's our next group?
Okay, so we're moving on to the next group, which is the traditionalists. These are people that are like steeped in tradition. They love family tradition. Their businesses are often tied to their families. So in this group, we have ISTJs, who I call the Rock. They are just the most reliable, structured people that you will ever come across. Often I see these types in family-owned businesses or franchises. So franchises can really work well for an ISTJ because they love implementing systems. So the branding, how we're going to be different, that's all taken care of by the bigger system. And then they can just come in and run it smoothly, consistently every day and make their money. So if you are an ISTJ making your own business, what I see for them is if they're setting up their own brand, it's that they don't really accentuate their point of difference enough. So that's what we do when we're working with an ISTJ brand. We try and help them communicate that structure, reliability, but also really pull out that point of difference for them.
Oh, that's great. Okay. And who else is a traditionalist?
So then we've got ESFJs, who we call the humble host. So these are like, the cheerleaders of the world. They have incredible social networks. Like while introverts maybe might have 2 or 3 people around them and they're really close to, and they're like, oh, I'm feeling like overwhelmed at people. These are the people that, know everybody in their community and somehow manage to be friends with them all, while us introverts are going, how do you even do that? So their businesses thrive through their networks. So the number one trap I see of these people is sort of trying to please everyone. So their businesses can get weighed down by people pleasing and sort of feeling put upon because they're trying to meet so many people's different needs. So when it comes to running their business, it's really putting some boundaries around win-win situations. Like, yes, you want your customers to win and your suppliers to win, but also make sure you're winning too.
Oh, that's so good. These are so great. Okay, cool. Let's talk about the number one traps for our last group. Who's our last group?
Okay, so we've still so the ISFJs, the last one in the traditionalists. So they're often caregivers.
Okay, wait. Hold on. Is there 3? Is there 3 in traditionalist?
Yes, there's 3 in traditionalists. Yes.
Oh,
so
what's
this
the
is
third? I'm
last one
sorry.
in traditionalists. Yes.
Yeah.
This is the third one in traditionalists. They're the caregivers. They're quite introverted. They will look after everyone. So what I see them doing is business is not fighting for themselves enough. So they won't stand up and promote themselves. They sort of hide in the background, which is fine to do, but it's just letting their business and getting their brand to help them have a bit more of a voice, because they're the number one people that will stand up and fight for others, but not themselves.
Oh, yeah. And I can see how that, when you're trying to grow your own business, we always should come at life and business from the how can we help others. But when you're running a business, there are decisions you have to be willing to make that it's going to be for the business's benefit. And in that case, that means it's for your benefit. And you have to sometimes make those hard calls. And I can imagine it's a lot harder for those that feel as if their number one driver is with helping other people.
Giving. Yes. Yep. It really can. Yeah. And that's their natural way of being. And they should absolutely be like that. It's just putting some boundaries and systems in place to make sure it's also profitable and their energy is looked after.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, great. Who's our next group?
So now we've got the change makers. So these are the INTJs, INFJs, and ENFJs in business. So I'll start with the INTJ. These are the master strategists. These people could run businesses really, really well. They're like just incredibly intelligent people. They can look to the future and know what needs to happen to make something run properly. But they're usually the people that sort of like to hide in the background. Like if you think of like a strategist in the old days of movies with kings and queens, he'd be the strategist on the side that's sort of like making the king his puppet. In a way. But what I've seen so much in business when they have come to me is sometimes because of the cognitive functions they use. So authenticity is in the backseat of their car. So these people can make anything happen. But what I found when they come to me is like they're making these outcomes happen, but they're actually not checking in with themselves to see if it's what they've actually wanted to do. So of all the INTJs that have come to me, once we go through the personality typing and then I help them look at their core values in depth, all of them have come back going, I don't want to run this business. So I had a person that was running big skincare brand. And when we went through this, he was like, I actually want to just go and teach yoga. I want to step away from this and teach yoga. Or there was another person that was running this big company and he wanted to become a day trader, just step away. They're introverted. He wanted to be by himself and just run the numbers. They love running numbers and strategies. Another one was a big corporate trainer who went away and became an art teacher. So these people, so the INTJs, it's good for them to check in to make sure what they're achieving is actually meeting their core values and what they want out of life.
So good. So good.
Cool. And then the next one is the INFJ, we call the catalyst. These are the world changers in terms of getting down to like individual people. So you often see them as healthcare, like in like acupuncture, counseling. They can sometimes be in corporate communications, but like really, these people are really good at holding space for others. So what they need to remember is to manage their own energy and protect their own energy while they're holding space for others. And also these people usually go really in depth, like they will come up with a system to help the world that has many, many layers. And I see them wanting to hold on to their information. Like if I give my information away, nobody will work with me. But actually, if they give all their information away, what they're doing is help setting up people to be prepared to come and work with them, because usually what they're teaching can't be, or it can be done by themselves, by others, but their role is to help people along the way and sort of give them the accountability and the feedback to make this big in-depth system that they've created work. So for INFJs, it's like, don't be afraid to give away your information. Like, let that be your marketing tool. So then people come to you and they go, I'm ready. I know your theory and your systems and how in-depth it is, and I'm ready to work with you.
That is so great. That's awesome. Okay.
Cool.
We're not done yet. We're going to keep going.
Then we've got the ENFJs, who we call the mentor. They often want to create bigger cultural change, but because of their cognitive functions they use, they lead with the cognitive function of harmony, which is meeting everybody's needs. And what this can look like is they've got this hidden inner rebel that really wants to speak out and make a difference in some sort of cause in some way, but they don't want to offend anyone. So often what I see ENFJs need to do is to sort of drop their good girl mask or their good person mask if they're a male, because ENFJs could be male or female, and step into being themselves and sort of releasing that inner rebel a bit and trusting that they will find their tribe of people rather than wanting to keep everybody happy.
So I totally understand it from that personality perspective of like not necessarily having your brand represent who exactly you are, because it could offend, right? It could offend or turn off other people. And then there's something to be said but you do not want to attract all the people. Like nobody can attract all the people into their business anyway. So you should be attracting the ones that you ultimately want to attract. So now let's talk about our last group, the life seekers.
Yes, life seekers. They're the ones that want to squeeze every good moment out of life. So we're starting with the ENFP. I call the ENFP the BFF, because in business, they just want everybody to succeed. They see everybody's potential and they want everyone to win. They're brilliant creative problem solvers. When it comes to building their business, their brand in terms of like what logos and colors they have doesn't matter so much, because often they are their brand. So if they spent their money on making some really great videos or having in-person conversations with people, that's going to work a lot better for them to build their business rather than getting hung up on what colors and logos and fonts they want, because they are just so charismatic that people aren't even going to care. So the number one thing that I see them falling into the trap of is feeling like they have it all together. So these types may have been told that, I think we spoke about in the first session, that they may have been told that they'd forget their head if it wasn't screwed on, or they never follow through with things. But this is because their driver process is called exploration. It's all about exploring new ideas, novelty, seeing and experiencing all the things in the world to create new patterns so they can do their problem solving. So the opposite of this is routine and structure. So if they're trying to problem solve and meet the needs of the people and be people's friend and coach them, if they're going into that space of like, oh, now I've got to follow up and write this proposal, and now I've got to do the admin, and I've got to check all these boxes and tick all these things, that takes them out of their genius state and actually reduces the successfulness of their business. So it's like, don't feel bad about doing that. It's like, it's okay for them to get their team to do that and set up systems where they're not stuck in that day-to-day routine of running a business.
I think that's so important for people to recognize how much of the day-to-day routine is involved in running a business, right? And
people don't realize.
They do not. You do your bookkeeping. I didn't realize. I know, like you do your bookkeeping 1 month and then you realize you got to do it 12 months out of the year. You'll be like, how quickly can I outsource this out? Right? Like,
absolutely.
Yes, there's so much. And I think it's important for people to recognize that there's not necessarily anything wrong, right? Or wrong with you that you don't enjoy this part of your business, but that doesn't mean it isn't going to actually ultimately happen.
Yes, but
you still got to make it happen, I guess is my point.
Yeah, you've still got to make it happen, or you've still got to make it happen, or you can look at how you can cut things out or make it simpler, or who can support you to do it. Or sometimes it's even just knowing that you're going to hate it and then allowing yourself more time for the good stuff, going, I know I'm going to hate this. There's nothing wrong with me. I've got to get it done. And then I can go back to my good things. So there's a lot of ways you can deal with those things.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Cool. Who else do we have in Life Seekers?
We have the ENTP, who I call the revolutionary. So they're really open-minded people. They're really curious. They're big self-educators. And I often see them running information businesses. So what they're really brilliant at doing is taking loads of information, complex information, and then sort of sifting through it and making it simpler for the rest of us, I guess, or making it simpler to understand and also easier to use. So taking these really complex things and going, this is how you can use this, understand it and use it to make your life better. So they have these information products. So the number one pitfall I find for them is that, again, with this routine side of business, is them feeling like they're having to be beholden to a system, so that they're stuck in the routines or the structures of making their businesses happen. So again, it's getting that support so they can be in they're often brilliant content creators. So they can be content creating and then passing it on to VAs going, now, can you put this in the system or in my course, Teachable, whether they're using Teachable or whatever the platform they're using, can you guys put that in there? And when it comes to their brand, again, it's the information that matters. So they don't need to get too hung up on what colors look good or, what their logo looks like. If their information is solid and their copywriting is good and it communicates to people, they will just really touch people's hearts with how much they can help them.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's funny, like you say some of the things that can be like how they operate. And then that's like, you're just saying how they naturally operate and what works well for them. And before you even talk about what their trap is, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do they live like that? Like, how do they run their business like that? I would go bananas because obviously that's not my personality type. Right.
Exactly.
But I just think it's so fascinating. Okay, cool. Is there anybody else in the Life Seekers group?
We've got 2 left. We've
All
got
right.
the ESFP, who I call the entertainer. These are the people, like, they thrive on social media. These are the people that jump onto social media and, their hair is perfect and they're completely manicured and they look like they live this amazing life. And you're like, I would need to spend 8 hours a day to make myself look like that, let alone be on social media every day looking like that. They just have amazing aesthetic abilities.
If anyone's wondering, that is not my personality. Okay, moving on. Keep going. What's their trap?
So their trap is so their brands are usually very visual. So beautiful photos, beautiful artwork. If they've got a product business, the product photos are beautiful. So they can sometimes get a bit caught up in that aesthetic or in the moment of things and forget to check in with themselves to see if this business is actually fulfilling them. So it can sort of end up being like, yeah, this looks beautiful, but have I got a meaning attached to it? Is it something that I can run for the next 20 years, or is this just something sort of pretty for now? So the trap that they fall into is sort of not looking at that long-term planning and checking in with themselves to go, can I do this? Can I be fulfilled doing this for a long period of time?
That's awesome. Okay. And our last one.
Our final, the ESTP is the showman. These people, these guys that they're in the moment, they lead with a cognitive function called sensation. So which is, that your 5 senses, like they're present in the moment in the physical world. And when they run businesses, they're usually businesses that are larger than life. Like if they might be have a technical business and they come out with these brilliant shows and they wow the people and people just can't wait to be part of their business because they've put on this amazing, fantastically sensory, in-depth show that just really captured them and made them feel alive. So they're charismatic. They're usually great salespeople, but again, sometimes they don't have a long-range plan. So if you think of businesses and brands like the ESTP, the guys that make those movies, Jackass.
Oh yes.
They can sort of be like this, like it's a great show and it's in the moment and people love them. Like they don't sort of think about the future. They're like, what can we do now to be just really awesome and make everyone feel really alive? But sometimes they don't think of the longer term consequences. So it's like having someone in their team that can go, okay, but how can you make this into a long-term sustainable business while you're doing all this amazing showmanship and sales type stuff?
Well, that's awesome. So I think this is so fascinating how you're looking at these 16 personality types that are kind of from the Myers-Briggs, but then how you're categorizing them into these 5 overalls because of the things that they have in common in terms of the car model of how they run their business. But then us getting to spend a little bit of time for each one of them going through and talking about the trap that they can sometimes fall into when growing their business, which I think is so important because as business owners, our ability to have self-awareness is so very important to us, not only being successful in business, but enjoying it while we're being successful.
You don't want to go into business and go, often people have this big dream and when the reality sets in, there's sort of this deflating moment of I had this dream, but this is the reality. But it's about having that self-awareness and not letting that get you down, but just pivoting a little and go, how can I make this more me? And how can I really increase my chances of success and happiness?
Absolutely. Okay. So remind everybody again, where can they go? What is the link that they can go and take this assessment and learn more about their personality type? And then, of course, more about you as well.
Absolutely. It's www.brandwhisperers.com.au.
All right. That's awesome. So that's where they can go and they can take the assessment. So guys, if you didn't take it last week and you're sitting here and we're going through each of these 4-letter codes and you're like, wait, which am I? And what's my trap? And how should I be growing my business? You're going to need to go take the assessment. Unless you remember, right, from days ago, if you took the Myers-Briggs years and years ago, like I did, and you needed to take it again because you couldn't remember, definitely go and take it so you can apply it as you're listening to not only this episode, but last week's episode 198. In addition to this week's episode, I'll, of course, link to Naomi's website where you can take the personality assessment in the show notes for this episode as well. And that is episode 199. So that would be stacybrownrandall.com/199. That's the show links page. So thank you again, Naomi, so much for joining us for this 2-parter. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
I would love for you to share your thoughts on these 2 episodes. Last week's episode 198. This week's episode 199. I would love for you to share your thoughts on these 2 episodes and the interviews that we did with Naomi on your personality type. And that means the type of category you fall into as a business owner. And of course, the trap that could hurt you in growing and running your business. Of course, you can find everything we've talked about in this episode in the show notes page at stacybrownrandall.com/199. That's for episode 199. And Stacy has an E. All right, coming up next week. Yes, it's the big enchilada in my mind. It's episode 200. Woohoo! We're going to do a celebration. I am very, very excited for episode 200. You are not going to want to miss this episode. I'm so excited to celebrate hitting 200 episodes. I'm just personally proud of myself for committing to this podcast and knowing that if I made the commitment, I was probably going to do it for a very long time. And here I am multiple of years later and still doing it and doing it every single week, dropping a new episode every Tuesday for the last 200 weeks. It feels like a stinking amazing accomplishment. I'm just going to put it out there and brag on myself for a second. But I hope you've also been enjoying all the episodes that you've listened to. If you're a longtime listener and you're like, I remember back when you did episode 1 or 10, I love you. Thank you for continuing to be a listener. And if you're a new listener of the podcast, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that you stumbled upon or were referred to this podcast and you've started listening. Hopefully it is a part of your weekly rotation of all the fabulous podcasts that you listen to. And I love knowing that I get to show up in your earbuds or through your car radio, or however you listen to your favorite podcast, that I get to show up and I get to help you think about growing your business, specifically from a referral perspective, but we talk about other things too. And I'm so excited to celebrate my 200th episode with you. And we've got something special planned, so don't miss it. Okay, until then, take control and grow your business. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. To access all resources and links mentioned in today's show and to connect with Stacy, head over to www.stacybrownrandall.com.